So here's my message for you this morning. We have an amazing guest speaker with us again this week. But thank you guys for coming this morning. Good morning, Salvage Church. Shout out to Montana. Good morning. We have some folks watching from Montana, Raleigh, North Carolina, all different parts of Maine, right? So I just thought I'd give a shout out. Everybody's watching on our online service. So last week we heard from a missionary from Latin America, right? And we heard about what's happening there and how important missions is. Well, this week we get to hear about Asia, right? So we have some friends here to share with us. Craig Alsup's going to come up here in a moment and share about Manna, share about what's going on in Asia, opportunities for us to link up with that and to be part of it. But missions is super important. We know that. It was funny, I was sharing with, Craig has his 2 kids and his wife up here, and I was talking with Sarah, his daughter, yesterday, and I was like, I went to school, high school, with a kid who had never been further away from home than the school we were at. Like, he grew up in Friendship. We were at Menominee Valley High School in Waldoboro. That's the furthest he'd ever been away from home. And her eyes got really big, and she said, I've walked on the Great Wall of China. So missions for these folks is a whole family thing. And so we want to have Craig come on up and share. Give him a warm welcome as he comes up and share with us. Craig Alsup.
All right. Appreciate that. Good morning. I think this thing's on now. Can you hear me? All right. That's a good start anyway, right? I made it up without tripping, and I turned my mic on correctly. I'm 2 for 2. Well, good morning, Salvage Church. I almost said Savage Church. I've accidentally said that a few times, but we'll take it. But good morning, and it's been a little while since we've been here. I know I recorded a video for you guys back in May. We were supposed to be here in person, but the world fell apart a little bit with the whole Corona thing, and so we ended up being here via a video, but excited to get to be here in person again. And so thank you guys for having us. This morning I want to challenge you for missions. I want to tell you a little bit about our family and what God's been doing even during this crazy year, and then challenge you to get directly involved. But let's start out and pray together, and then we'll jump right in. Father, thank you for this morning. God, just thank you for this place and these people. Thank you that we can come together both physically in person in the building here at Salvage Church, as well as online and from wherever we are throughout this country and around the world. God, I just thank you that we can all participate in the mission of Christ, that we can be a part of reaching others in our community, in our cities, in our nation, and around the world. And God, that you give us both the command to do that, but also the power working in and through us of your Holy Spirit to do the work. And so God, I thank you for that. I ask that you'll challenge us this morning, that you'll speak to the hearts of people, that you'll have people turn to you and turn to you more fully with their lives in order to step out in faith and do what you ask them to do next. So God, thank you for this moment, and allow us to just soak it all in. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Well, church, I want to introduce my family. I think we've got a picture on the slideshow there of my family, all of us. We took this picture in New Hampshire last year. So the kids have grown a little bit, but we're gonna pretend that didn't happen. But this is us. It's me, my wife Jennifer, who is somewhere over there in the middle, and then Sarah and Jude. Sarah just turned 9, which is crazy, and Jude is 6, going on like 26 or 36 or something. He knows everything right now, especially this morning. But that is our family. There's lots of ways to connect with us. If you're watching online, if you're here in person, there's lots of ways to connect with us and just find out more about our family and what we do and what God is doing through our lives and in our lives. And so I want to challenge you just to connect with us. I want to tell you a little bit about Manna because it's been a little while since we've been here. You guys may have forgotten or not been here last time we were here, but Manna is now working in 50 countries around the world. Manna was founded in 2001, so in 19 short years, we've expanded now into 50 countries. We have about 235 different ongoing projects. These are projects that are happening every day, that are happening, every day of the year, whether or not I'm there or not. These are projects that are partnered with local missionaries, with pastors, with people that are on the ground, long-term, full-time. And these people are planting churches, and we're sometimes helping them to plant churches. Actually, we've helped to plant over 100 churches in the last 19 years. But then they're looking outside the doors of the churches, just like you guys do, and they're seeing people in their community that desperately need Jesus, that need help and hope, that need healing, that need food and water and shelter and clothing and all these things. And so Manna Worldwide comes alongside these local churches to help start orphanages, nutrition centers, schools, medical clinics, anti-child trafficking projects, dig water wells, whatever we can do to tell people in a community that Jesus loves them, that Jesus cares about them. I had a friend in Nepal once tell me that you can't reach somebody with the gospel who can't hear it over their stomach growling. And that's the premise that we work upon. That's the premise that Manna works upon, is that we need to reach people at their most desperate physical need sometimes, to create a relationship, to create a bond, to connect with people so that we can give them what they really need, which is Jesus. And so it works so well to connect with people in that way, to love on people's kids, to love on families, to help to lift them out of their physical poverty, but to give them Jesus along the way. Now, I want to make sure that we understand that if we just go over and dump money into the poverty problem, that's not what God asked us to do. You see, Jesus commanded us to give them the gospel. But Jesus also reached people at their desperate physical need. And so what we do is partner those two things together long-term, full-time, so that people are over and over hearing the gospel. They're hearing about Jesus, and they're seeing the work of Jesus in their lives. And so we get to do that through these orphanages and nutrition centers and all this stuff. We're going to talk about an orphanage in just a little while that you guys can actually partner with, can be a part of, can make sure that these kids hear about Jesus and have their physical needs met. So as assistant directors for Asia, my family and I, yes, we get to travel a lot. My kids are like travel snobs at this point. They've been to, I think, 9 or 10 different countries. Sarah's been to as many countries as years, and Jude more so. They've walked on the Great Wall, and they've been to France, and they've climbed the Eiffel Tower, and they've been to Nepal, and they've been to Fiji, and they've been to all these places, but we do it all because, man, we get to tell people about Jesus. And so God has been good to allow us to get to see a lot and do a lot. But as a family, we have this kind of interesting take on missions, interesting way that we're allowed to be a part of the mission, and that is that we base here in the United States with Manna. We travel around the country. We speak in about 30 to 40 churches per year. Actually, this year, we're speaking in more churches than we did last year, which is weird, right? With the world shut down, but somehow live streams and all that stuff help. And so we get to travel around and speak in churches and challenge people to get involved with the mission of Christ in their community and around the world. We get to challenge people with what Jesus told us to do, to go, to tell all nations, to tell all people, to baptize, to make disciples, to go to our Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. And so as a family, we travel around and we get to do that, and then we get to take people who partner with a project, and we get to take them there and go to that project, and we get to introduce them to the kid that's there because they give. We get to introduce them to the person that found Jesus because they thought it was important enough to give and to pray for that project and those kids. And so, hint, hint, I want to invite you guys, as soon as the world reopens for mission trips, I want to invite you guys to come and be a part of that, to come with us. If you're sitting here today in the building, or if you're watching online from your living room or wherever you are, this is your challenge. Come be a part of missions. Come with us. We want to introduce you to those kids that have changed our lives forever, those families that have changed our lives forever. Now this morning I want to talk with you a little bit about having a do something faith. When Jennifer and I started out in missions 5 years ago, we had to raise our personal support. Like we had to travel around and ask people to donate, to give to us, to raise our support through Manna Worldwide so that we could go and do this work. And one of the things that we said in the very beginning is what we want to find is do something Christians. Like we want to find believers who are not just like hearers of the word, but that are doers of the word. Like we want people on our team that are excited doers. And so this morning I want to talk with you about having a do something faith. A faith that takes steps out of the boat of your comfort zone and into the direction that God is leading you. Ooh, I'm fuzzy for a second there. I want to tell you the story of a kid named Ajay. If we can click over a couple slides to the young man there playing the guitar. Ajay is an incredible kiddo. I actually talked with him yesterday through Facebook Messenger. Isn't that cool how we have that connection? Ajay is from the country of Nepal. He actually grew up in the orphanage that you guys are partnering with us. And so I want to tell Ajay's story a little bit. You see, Ajay was there in 2008 when Jennifer and I first went to this orphanage. We met him as a kid, so he's kind of always a kid to me, but he's a young adult now. He's about 19, 20 years old. And Ajay learned about Jesus in our orphanage. He came to faith in Jesus in our orphanage. He learned English in our orphanage. He learned to play the guitar and lead worship and sing in our orphanage. But, man, there's so much more to Ajay than that. You see, Ajay could have been born and raised into desperation. He could have been born and raised in Hinduism, which some 80-something% of people in Nepal are considered Hindu. So he could have been born and raised into a situation where he believed in millions and millions of different gods and goddesses that we all know to be false. But God placed him in a place where he could hear about Jesus, where he could hear about the one true God. Ajay, growing up, has always been an outstanding young man. He's always been a leader in the orphanage. He's always been like one of the older kids, and so he's always kind of taken charge and been a leader. And just a couple years ago, we were on a mission trip in Nepal, and I had my whole team, as we often do, as we usually do. We piled into this bus with all 30-something of these kids from the orphanage, and we drove up the mountain, and we found a place there on the mountain where there was like a restaurant building built. And we were going to do lunch, and then we were going to go up on the roof of that restaurant and look out over all the villages, all the beautiful scenery of all these huge mountains around us, and we were going to worship, and we were going to do some preaching, teaching, and just have like a Saturday morning worship service. And so we do that, and this photo that you see here is Ajay on that morning playing his guitar. And so Ajay is playing his guitar, he's leading worship, he's singing, we have this incredible time, and then afterwards all the kids kind of go down from the rooftop. And it's me and Ajay. And we're standing on the edge of this rooftop and we're looking out at the mountains, and we see little groupings of houses, sometimes 2 or 3, sometimes one house, sometimes 10 or 12 or 50. But all these houses spread out on these mountains. And I kind of look over at Ajay and I say, Ajay, how are these people going to hear about Jesus? Like, what about them? And he looks at me and says, like, I don't know. And I say, well, Ajay, you know that I can't go to all these people, right? He kind of looks at me funny. I say, you know that most of these villages, when they see somebody that looks like me, that talks like me, that dresses like me, show up in a village like those, they know that more than likely I'm there to tell them about Jesus. And they don't want to hear about a white man's religion. They don't want to hear about this Western religion. They don't want to hear about it. So those doors are closed to me just based on how I look. And he looks at me with tears in his eyes. And he says, I'll go. Man, there's nothing more powerful. There's nothing more powerful. This young man that we saw grow up in what some people would consider a desperate situation, living in an orphanage with nothing, knows the King. And he's willing to go and share him. And so I get home from this mission trip, and man, I had this moment ingrained in my mind of Ajay in that moment with tears in his eyes saying, I'll go. And I get a message about a month later from Ajay. And he says, I've got the opportunity to go to a training thing with YWAM, Youth with a Mission, and to get trained how to share the gospel among my people and how to lead worship better so that we can reach people for Jesus. And so we put together some people, some pastors from all over the United States that helped to fund him to go. And in January of this year, he landed in India at the YWAM training area there. And he starts his training. And then in March, does anybody remember what happened? The world sort of comes to a halt in March, right? India closes their borders, shuts down all flights and buses and trains and everything else. Ajay's training was supposed to end at the end of March, but he was stuck. Nepal shut their borders. He was stuck. And so I messaged with Ajay and I said, man, how you doing? Do you have everything you need? Do you need me to send you money? Like, are you okay? And he goes, yeah, like we're fine. We're just here learning how to share the gospel better. And I guess we'll just continue to do that until the doors open, till I can get back home. So the end of March comes and goes. He's supposed to be back in Nepal. April happens. He's supposed to be back in Nepal. May happens. June happens. July happens. August happens. September happens. Ajay just made it back home like last week. Ajay spent, I don't know how many months is that? April, May, June, July, August, September. He spent an extra 6 months at this camp learning to share his faith and learning to lead worship. And all this time I'm messaging with Ajay and I'm like, dude, are you okay? Like, I know you've been away from home for a long time. Are you okay? Yeah, man, I'm learning more than I ever imagined I would. God's going to use this for good. He's like, we're getting to do local outreach. We're getting to learn how to share our faith better. So let me tell you, sometimes in these moments when, we're having to wear masks and we're having to not go to places and not have too many people in the building and all this stuff, listen, God can use any and every little thing in our lives that annoys us and frustrates us for good. So let me encourage you in that. Let me encourage you that last night Pastor and I were talking about online streaming and video and lives and all this stuff, and how now we have people watching from all over the country, sometimes all over the world, church services that are happening in our local communities. That's cool. That's not what we would have chosen for our lives, probably, these moments. But God can use that. Church, I want to talk with you for a moment out of Matthew 14. And this is kind of a story that we know well. Matthew 14 is this moment where the disciples are in the boat and they go out and Jesus tells them, go across the sea, like I'll catch you later. And he's like up on the mountain doing his thing. He's praying. He's having time to himself. And this moment happens. This moment happens where there's water and there's waves, and all of a sudden Jesus is walking on the water. Isn't that cool? Like, who would have liked to have been there for that moment, right? Show of hands. Like that would have been pretty epic, right? Like if you picked the moments in the Bible that you could have been there for, that's one of the top. I mean, that's pretty neat. Jesus walks on the water, and he calls Peter out of the boat to walk on the water too. You remember that? And so let's read it together. The Bible says, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat, and this is after he was speaking to a crowd. He made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And it says, when evening came, he was there alone, but the boat by this time was a long way from the land. It was beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. And I just had to highlight the walking on the sea there. This is unusual, right? Let me tell you, sometimes when God does something unusual, it's the time that we're meant to pay attention most. Like when something happens and you go, something big's happening here. He's walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and they said, it's a ghost. I mean, who else would have said that? Yes, probably. And they cried out in fear, but immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. I want to tell you, in the moments that are the scariest to us, Jesus wants to tell us, take heart. Don't be afraid. I love how Jesus immediately calms their fears here. Like he sees the fear in their eyes, he hears them cry out, he immediately comes to them and comforts them. Isn't that what Jesus does? Isn't he good? And Peter, being like the wild man that Peter was, my picture in my head of Peter is that he would have called Salvage Church Savage Church too. Like he was a little feisty, you know what I'm saying? Have you guys watched there's a TV show, what is it, like Chosen or something? Is it Chosen? There's a TV show right now called Chosen, and Peter's character in that show, I think, is perfect. Like he's pretty savage. Like he's a little feisty. And so that's how I picture Peter when I read the Bible. I just I picture this kind of wild man. Like he probably would have got along just as well with John the Baptist as anybody else, right? And so Peter answered him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. Peter knew Jesus was capable of a command. May we all know that. And Jesus said, come. So Peter got out of the boat and he walked on the water and came to Jesus. And when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand, I love it, immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? When they got in the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, Truly, you are the Son of God. So Jesus, in this moment, he immediately tells them, take heart, it's I, do not be afraid. And then Peter boldly says, hey, I'm willing to get out of the boat, just, as long as you're commanding it, I feel pretty safe here. And then he got a little nervous, like most of us would. And Jesus doesn't leave him. And Jesus immediately reaches out to love him and to serve him, to help him. Our faith is meant to be a do-something faith, church. See, Peter in that moment, he had a do-something faith. He was willing to do something nobody had ever done before because he knew Jesus was capable At least he had an inkling. Jesus was capable of doing the miraculous. In Matthew 14, we see the disciples on the boat, and Jesus and Peter have this chat, and Peter is called out. But Peter ultimately, even though Peter is the one that started the conversation, like, command me to come out of the boat, Peter had a choice to make, church. Don't miss that. You see, Peter was a fisherman. Peter knew boats inside and outside, right? Anybody else a fisherman? Anybody else like to fish? I'm pretty bad at it, but I did beat everybody in Jennifer's family catching fish last week. I'm just saying. Just in case they're watching online, I just want to point that out. It's whatever. But you're a fisherman, you know boats. Like, you know what a boat is good for, right? Like, a boat is necessary to get you from one place to the other in the water unless you want to get really wet. Right? Peter understood the usefulness of a boat. The boat was Peter's comfort zone. Like, the boat was something Peter got. Man, he was happy in a boat. He was good. He knew how to do all the things. I don't even know what to call them. All the things that you do on boats to make it float. Like, he didn't do what I would have done and like plug the hole in the boat with a stick of gum, right? Like, he knew boats. Now, what does this mean for us, church? What I want to say is that the boat is Peter's comfort zone. What's your comfort zone? Like, where's the place? What's the place? Who are the people that we are comfortable around? That we can just live our lives and get by and be comfortable and happy and have a convenient, comfortable little Christian life. But our faith isn't meant just for comfort, is it? Like, Jesus comforts us, but Jesus comforted them in some pretty uncomfortable situations. Maybe Jesus can comfort us most when we step out to do something that's the most uncomfortable for us. Like, maybe we see Jesus show up in the most incredible, beautiful, awe-inspiring, miraculous ways if and only if we take a step. You know, all the other disciples on the boat that night were probably afterwards pretty frustrated that they didn't ask. You know what I'm saying? Like, how would you have liked to be one of the other disciples in that moment? Like, in the moment where Peter asked, they're like, here goes Peter again, he's going to drown, this is going to be not good. But then the miraculous happens. And all the others have to look at it and go, oh, man, like, I missed my shot. Now, it would just be weird if I said, hey, me too, right? But there's another moment, church. There's another moment that Peter remembers. I believe in Matthew 14, Peter remembers a moment that we're told about in Luke 5. You see, in Luke 5, Jesus met Peter in his boat. I think it's important. You see, if our first moments with Jesus are these moments where he's asking you to get out of your boat on rocky, rough waters where you may or may not drown, there's not very many of us that are going to step out of the boat. Right? But Jesus doesn't meet us first in those moments. He eventually calls us to those moments, I believe. If we take steps of faith, if we are do something Christians, he eventually calls us to those moments. But Luke 5 tells us a story where Jesus meets Peter in the boat, in his comfort zone. And if you've come to faith in Jesus here today or watching online, you know, Jesus, sometimes it's uncomfortable when we get called into faith in Jesus, but then we begin to learn about him. We begin to get to know Him. We begin to get to see what He does in our lives and how He comforts us and how He loves on us and how He cares for us. And these are these moments that Luke 5 talks about with Peter in the boat, in his comfort zone. Jesus meets Peter on Peter's terms. Peter comes up, or Jesus comes up, and Peter's on the boat, and Jesus is speaking to a crowd, and he's like, you know what would be cool if I spoke to this crowd from the sea? Because what's cooler than that, right? And so he asked Peter, can I get on your boat, and let's push out from the edge a little bit. And so they do, and Jesus gets on Peter's boat, and you can imagine Peter being a boat guy, being like, yeah, come on my boat. Let me show you. Let me show you my boat. It's going to be great. I can I can be the guy that's important in this moment, right? Like I can be the guy that Jesus chose. That's cool. And Peter pushes out a little from shore, and Jesus teaches, and Peter gets to hear this incredible teaching. And Peter's called out to follow him. But it doesn't take a great step of faith at first for Peter to say, sure, get in my boat, does it? There's no leap at first. But over time, after this moment in Luke 5, the relationship builds. Peter sees Jesus' power. And then Jesus asks more of him. Church, I want to tell you that there's not a moment in our life after we come to faith in Jesus where we should just be completely still, where we should just be unwilling to step out. Now there are those moments, let me say that differently. There are those moments where we should be still and listen to God. But what are we listening for? Our marching orders. Like we're listening for what God would have us do. Our faith is meant to be a faith walk. And sometimes if we sit in our faith for too long, man, we get too comfortable. We can get stuck. But following Jesus is just that. It's following Jesus. So, Jesus and Peter build this relationship from Luke 5, and it turns into what we see in Matthew 14, where Jesus calls Peter out of the boat. Have you had that moment in your life? Have you had a moment since you came to faith in Jesus where Jesus says, okay, you've read enough, you've listened enough, you've learned enough, take a step? I think most of us probably have. But I think that's supposed to be a repetitive thing that we're looking forward to and asking Jesus for. Now, let me tell you, there's nothing wrong with your boat. Like there's nothing wrong with our comfort zone, church. There's nothing wrong with it. God is a God of comfort. He loves us. He wants to care for us. Jesus immediately reaches out to comfort His disciples in multiple different occasions that we've read about today. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with our comfort. There's nothing wrong with our current situation. But I want to tell you, there is more. There's more to this life, and in order to see it, you need a step of faith. And so listen, if you're comfortable, if you're stuck, if you heard the story of Jesus and the Holy Spirit impacted your heart and called you to faith in Him, but then you thought there's one more thing that you need to learn. Man, you got to get more proficient in the Bible. You got to be in church enough. You got to come to the right Bible studies and do all the right stuff. Let me tell you, that's not it. Now, all that stuff helps. It helps in our learning and all those things, and it helps us to be in places where we get challenged. But if we never step out, it's wasted. If we never step out, sadly, somebody else will get to see your miracle. Let me say it again. Like somebody else, if we're not careful, will get to see God do something incredible because He's going to do it either way, and we won't get to be a part of it. You guys heard of like fear of missing out, FOMO? Man, may we have like a righteous fear of missing out. May we have a fear of missing out on what God is doing in this community and around the world, church. May we be willing to take steps of faith. Let me say it this way. You need to do something you've never done, church, so that you can see something that you've never seen. Peter had to do something. He had to step over the edge of a boat in a rough sea. He had never done that before, probably. But he got to see God do something incredible. I'm convinced that our life is supposed to be that way. Our life is supposed to be a string of seeing Jesus do the incredible. I don't know your situation or your faith journey, but I know that there's going to come a day, and there's probably already been some days, where Jesus has bid you come in the same way that He did Peter. You'll want to stay safe. You'll want to stay within the confines of your comfort zone. But let me tell you, man, there's a miracle waiting on the other side. And if we never step out, if we never serve people and love people and give to people and go to people and go on mission trips, if we never tell people about Jesus by taking a step out of our comfort zone, we'll miss it. We'll miss it. Man, that's frightening. There's a little girl named Amisha in that same orphanage. I still say little girl. She's like 15 or 16. I think I've reached that age now where I can call a 15-year-old a little girl, right? But her name's Amisha, and she's an incredibly just brilliant, beautiful, like outgoing, fun, friendly Jesus follower. But about 2 years ago, she came to our orphanage after living on the streets for quite a while. She had nothing and no one. She was dirty and scared. I met her a month after she moved into our orphanage in Nepal. And she was so fearful of people. Like she was broken. And she didn't know what to expect. Like we were the first mission team that had been there since she moved in. She didn't really know English very well yet. She had basically just heard about Jesus for the first time. And during our time there at this orphanage, I don't know why, but God just kept leading me back to Amisha. And so one day we split up our mission team, and just like we usually do this in some different ways, but we split up our mission team with different groups of kids. And we prayed for them, and we talked with them, and we heard their stories and what they pray for and what they care about, and we prayed over them and loved on them and just said, how can we serve you and pray for you? And so I grabbed one of our other little girls that's been there a really long time, and I grabbed Amisha. And I said, y'all come here and let's talk and pray together. And so one of our young ladies was translating for me because Amisha didn't understand a lot of English. And I got the opportunity to talk with her and hear her story and pray for her. And then at the end I said, Amisha, will you pray for me? And really, as not even a believer at that point, she kind of looks at me like incredulously. Like nobody had ever asked her to pray for them before. And so I got to explain that Like God cares. He hears our voices. Like He wants to listen to your prayer just as much as mine or anyone else's. And like we have this beautiful moment where she just like fumbles through, I don't know what to say, and prays a few words in Nepali for me. And I walk away and go, wow, man, I feel like God's going to do something incredible in this little girl's life. And I get back there about 4 or 5 months later, well, maybe 6 months later, and she's come to faith in Jesus. And she's learned a lot more English, which is cool. It's incredible. I wish I could learn other languages that well, but she's learned a lot more English, and she's come to faith in Jesus, and I get to talk with her and pray with her and stuff again. And then I go back on another mission trip a few months later. And one of Amisha's teachers at school mentioned that there were lots of kids in Africa who didn't have enough food to eat, and who didn't have their basic needs met. And Amisha tells me she's been praying for those kids and those people. And God called her to step out in faith, to do what she could, to pray, to care. And with tears in her eyes, she tells me about the poor kids in Africa. And I go, Amisha, that was you. Like that was you. But God's done something incredible in her life. Where there last time I got to preach and teach a little bit and share, and at the end of it just said, kids, I want to challenge us all. My mission team that was there, it was like 18 of us there or something. And I said, I want to challenge us all, and I want to challenge you kids. I'm going to pray in a moment. And I know that most of you have come to faith in Jesus now. I want to challenge you to say, I'm willing and ready to step out in faith to go be a missionary in my community, in my city, in my country, around the world, wherever God calls me to go. So I'm going to pray, and when I kneel down and start praying, if you want to say yes to that, you step forward. I say things like that in churches in the United States. I very rarely have anybody step forward. I mean, even like when I say, come up to us at the table and talk about missions and stuff like that, and I very rarely have anybody step forward, truthfully. Every now and then, 1 or 2 people. Hit my knees, started to pray. Heard all this commotion around me. I don't know if you do this, but when you're praying and you hear lots of commotion around you, do you kind of open your eyes and glance around? I think that's okay. I think God's cool with that, first of all, right? But I hear all this noise around me, and I start to look up, and I see all these kids coming. And my mission team coming, and all of us, before long, are on our knees, praying and saying, God, yes, call us out of our boat. Call us out of our comfort zone. Ask us to do what it is you'll have us do next. And Amisha was one of the first ones to hit her knees. I want to tell you briefly about the orphanage in Nepal that Amisha and Ajay are a part of. There's 30-something kids there. Jennifer and I went there for the first time in 2008. They were in a different house with a sewer, open sewer running through the middle of the house, kind of an outdoor-indoor space. And it was a tough situation, but we just felt God doing something there. And so we started to give financially in 2008 to this orphanage, and we've been able to do that, thank the Lord, for the last 12 years. And so I'm not going to challenge you to do anything today that I won't do, that I haven't done, that I don't do. Let me put that out there. But this orphanage with 30-something kids now has grown. We got some land donated. We got a bunch of money donated, built them a new big, nice 3-story house with a big room on the top just for worship. These kids' space like tripled They move to a nicer location. And they hear about Jesus every day. They hear about Jesus in Bible study every single night together. And so when I challenge you to give and to go and to serve these kids, it's because, man, these are my kids. It's because they matter to God. They're His kids. It's because God is doing the incredible there. So 30 plus kids in Pokhara, Nepal. And we have some other donors, both individual and churches, who have donated to this project over a long time. And now the project has fallen about $300 to $500 or so short of what Manna generally sends to them every month. And so I want to challenge us this morning to get involved. Just as I challenged within the sermon portion this morning, I want to challenge us to step out of our boat, to say they matter. And so if you would like to get involved in that way, there's some cards sitting around here and there that have the Manna logo and some info on the front of kind of what we do and how we do it. It's got our website and stuff, so if you want to copy that down and check that out. If you're watching online, obviously, couldn't get you a card to your living room, but I'll try to post the website and some of that information for you in the comments section of the video in just a bit. But you'll flip the card over for those of you here today. And on the back side of the card, there's a place where you could fill out and say that I will sponsor blank child or children at $28 a month. And then it goes down like I will support a child annually if you want to do that. I would like to sponsor so many kids at whatever amount monthly. And then you fill out your name and your address and your email address and all that stuff on there so that you can get information about what you're giving to. And so you can get the Manna newsletter and our family newsletter and all those things. So if you want to do that, go ahead and fill those out. Now, I want to tell you that usually I want to make sure that I tell you to give above and beyond your norm. Like, I never want to go into a church and have somebody say, I usually give this much per month to the church, but now I'm just going to carve out an extra $28 out of that and give that to Manna instead. It's not how it works. It's not a step of faith, right? So I want to challenge us to take a step of faith to say, above and beyond my normal giving, I want to give because these kids matter to God and they matter to me, and because I want to take a step. I want to be a part. And then I want to challenge you again to get on a trip with us. I want to challenge you to go to Nepal, hopefully in 2021 with us, to go and meet the kids that are there because you give. There's nothing more powerful. Jesus himself said what we give to connects our heart, right? Wherever our finances go, there goes our heart. But we could take that one step further and we could say if we give to something, yes, our heart is going to be connected with it, but if you let me introduce you to the Amishas and the Ajays, God's going to do something. God's going to do a work in us. It's going to change things for us for the better forever. And for these kids. So I want to challenge you to fill those cards out, to give those to us after service. We've got a table set up directly behind the booth here out in the lobby. And stop by and give us cards if you want more information, if you want to talk more about how to give and all that stuff. Give through Salvage Church. Just give it and tag it to Manna Worldwide so that Salvage can then pool those funds and send them to us for that project. Again, give above and beyond. Step out there and talk with us. Grab a prayer card and all that stuff. Talk with us about trips. We had trips planned this year to Nepal in June and October. And so we're hoping that the world reopens and we could do those trips next year. And so you'll hear more about that if you connect with us on Facebook, or if you connect with us by joining our newsletter list and getting our emails. I want to pray, and then I want to invite Pastor Mike back up here. And I just want each of us to be willing to say to God this morning, God, what would you have me do? Sometimes we can get like real collective in our prayers and say, thank you, God, for having us here. Why does he have you here? Like, why does he have you here this morning, hearing about this? And what can you do? Father, thank you for this morning, God. Just thank you for the challenge that you give us each day to step out of our boat, to step out of our comfort zone, and to step into what you would have for us. God, lead each of us here today towards exactly what you would have us do, to step out of our comfort zone, to step out of our boats, to get to see you do what only you could do. God, lead us in these moments. Help us to be do something Christians. And God, thank you for Amisha and for Ajay. God, for all the kiddos at Peace Child Home who have worshiped you, who have loved you, who have served you, even in their sometimes brokenness, even in their lack. God, let us be believers like that. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Hello? Oh, there we go. Amen. That was awesome. Wasn't that great? That was good. A do something faith. I like that. I like that. So, I want to encourage you. I know Craig just did, and a lot of times when we're in churches, we sit there and we think, yeah, well, that's what he's here for, right? Okay, sure. You can't tell me what to do, right? I mean, I know nobody here or watching ever feels that way, but, I've had a time or two in my life where I've been, like, you can't tell me what I'm supposed to do. Now, I'm not going to tell you what you're supposed to do either, but as a pastor here at Salvage Church, I want to encourage you to get one of these cards. You probably have one in your seat or a seat next to you that talks about giving, and Craig talked about it in the back. You can give, to a kid monthly. You can do a child for a year. So this says, I want to support a child annually for $336. Is that correct? For a year. $336 for a year. And you could have a story where there's a Misha or an Ajay whose life is drastically changed. Like, that's crazy to me that we're Christians. We're called to step up and to do things. Right? I said it on Thursday night at the Bible study. We are called to help people. That's what we're called to do. That's why I said I love being here in New England, because in the center of all these old New England towns is a church, because the church is supposed to be the center of the town, and the church is supposed to be helping. Well, we also have to help in our communities, but God has called us to make a difference around the world, and we can make a difference to these kids' lives in Nepal for $336 a year or $28 a month. Like, we should get on board and do that. Right? So if you're able to do that, please do. Fill that out. Go back to the table, see it, see them. I want us to get involved here at Salvage Church as well with this opportunity with Manna and the group in Nepal. I want to go to Nepal. Who wants to come with me? Anyone? Oh, we got a couple people. All right, who wants to go to Mongolia? Ooh, wow. Okay, Nepal, Fiji? Oh, yeah. What is wrong? That's like the more people for Fiji. Why? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know why. Because it's like snorkeling in Fiji or climbing through the mountains of Nepal. Right? Or where else you guys are going to? I know I missed some. Panama? Cambodia? Anyone? Cambodia, anybody? I know there are people raising their hand online. They're like, I want to go to Cambodia. Yeah, so once the world opens back up, I never thought I would have to say that, but once we're allowed to leave the country and go into all these other countries, we want to get involved in some of those trips. But how awesome would it be for us here at Salvage Church to get involved with the orphanage in Nepal, and then next year go on a trip to the orphanage in Nepal? I'm just saying, like, that's an opportunity. That's what it's all about. As Craig said in the very beginning, it's not just about sending money or putting money into this, the poverty problem. It's about being part of the solution. And part of that solution is giving, and part of that solution is going. Right? And I loved Ajay's response. Looking over the valley and just like, who's going to go? It's like, I'm going to go. I love that. Right? That is such a biblical principle. Right? God puts it on our heart all the time to say, who's going to go? Who's going to go? Who's going to be my hands and my feet in these places in the world? And I want us, right? I want Salvage Church to be hands and feet for God all over the world. Here in Rockland, in Maine, United States, and all over the world. That's what God called us to do. So take these cards, fill them out, please, so we can get involved in that. On your way out, there is, don't leave yet, because we're going to have the worship team's going to come up and close us in song. But on your way out, you can, there's some baskets back there if you want to give in your tithes and your offerings that way. Or if you guys are like super duper, you're already probably giving online, right? You can go to our website, you can go to our Facebook page, and there's links to online giving. But you can do that. Thank you guys for coming. Let's have the worship team come on up. Or shan't we? You're pointing at me and giving thumbs up. Oh, yeah, so there's a video for those of you who are watching online and watching up over my head. This is the video that tells you how to go on to our website and to give a one-time gift or a reoccurring gift. Yes, I was like giving thumbs up and pointing, and I didn't know if I was supposed to pray or steal second. Whichever one. Could be. All right. So, yes, follow the directions online to give, or if you're here in person, you can give in the baskets on your way out. And don't forget these cards. Take it away, worship team.